I hope we are live. I haven't. Hey Chris, hey, thanks for joining, man. And this is one of the topic that is extremely close to both of us. So why don't we hit it straight today? I mean, the question that everyone is asking, especially in this crisis nowadays, is what happened to nuclear? I mean, these countries have given up nuclear. They didn't have renewables in place, and they have significant dependence on Russia, which is not turning out well in their favor. So, is nuclear dead? I think that's the right point to start with. What do you think?
I don't think so. I think nuclear, to a certain degree, after Fukushima, definitely slowed down a lot. But after what happened with the Russians, I think nuclear is already making a resurgence. There's certain parts of the nuclear industry right now that are innovating like crazy. The Department of Energy here in the U.S. has also been very supportive of some of the companies. Primarily the one that I would say is NuScale, and I think nuclear has a point where it is going to be a part of our future. A lot of people don't think that, but it is. And it just may not be in the form of nuclear that we're all used to. Right now, everyone thinks of nuclear, they think of Homer Simpson sitting around in a,
I think you're
you
going
know,
out
in a
again.
nuclear power plant, being a safety person and doesn't know what to do. And, these giant, like, what do they call those, condenser, like the cooling towers. That's not what the future of nuclear looks like. And, we'll get into it, of course.
No, makes sense. I mean, so I have a like a view on nuclear, and it's a bit radical. Okay, let me see if I play this video. Let me know if you could hear the volume.
No, it's too low. It's too low.
The volume is low, or you cannot hear.
No, I can't hear it. I think I hear something, but it's definitely not.
Okay, so
Yeah,
let me
no.
now let me just try to. I mean, see the challenge with the nuclear. I mean, if I take a view that for us to like be a generation or be a species that is going to leave Earth in one way or another. I mean, being a science student, I find it very difficult to fathom that we can do it without nuclear power.
Yeah.
Okay, that's one of the view I have. Now, what I see is like I think this is one of the big challenge that everyone has is that whenever we talk about nuclear, the biggest challenge for everyone to come up is that because nuclear has its origin in a very violent past. People thought about nuclear in terms of atomic bomb, and we have seen during the Cold War that it didn't go well. Also, especially like when we saw what happened in Chernobyl, I think that created quite a scare for a lot of countries as well as I mean for everyone whether to be pursued it or not to be pursued it. So the challenge that nuclear has not yet able to kind of overcome is the stigma that comes with nuclear. I mean, it's people worry about their safety, people worry about their life, and that pretty much has sent back nuclear a long back. So that's the challenge, and I think this is one of the big challenge I find is that people and in a lot of circles I discuss about like energy quite broadly and people just tell me a lot of times see let's not bring nuclear on table and I ask them why. They say that one of the biggest challenges first that I mean nuclear is just not about energy, it's about like a global order. So a lot of countries do not want to share nuclear technologies outside a selected club. So that is, if you take that view, you already know that this is not going to be a technology until and unless that view is changed, which can actually grow into a larger piece. The question is, the countries that control the technologies, can they increase the nuclear share? Okay, that is, and even that hasn't happened in certain. I mean, the only country if you see in the last decade is China. I think China got around 39 nuclear reactors working in this time. Every
India
other
too. India too. India's been
India
developing its
too.
nuclear thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, and Japan has taken another route, especially after Fukushima, where they are trying to move away from nuclear as much as possible. So the reality is that I mean, it's an immense source of power that cannot be denied. Okay. Then the challenges, that stigma that comes with it, especially given the accidents, that also cannot be denied. I think that's given. Okay. The question is, can it be done safely? And it will always be challenged. But the way I look at the problem is that, see, the resources on Earth are finite. And today we are talking about renewable energy, and also in a longer term picture, you have to figure out ways to move out of Earth at some point of time. People can say it's too far in future, but the way we are expanding on Earth, I think I don't think it's that far. And in order to move out from Earth, yeah, I mean, it's very difficult to move or leave sustainably outside without nuclear. People can argue about it that there is some water on Moon, there is some water on Mars that can be used to produce hydrogen. But yeah, I mean, nuclear is an option. I mean, hydrogen as a fuel has not been succeeded. I mean, it hasn't got success as a fuel on Earth. So you expecting that it will succeed anything other than cryogenic fuel at Moon or Mars is quite a task. So nuclear is something that is very critical in terms of what it can do. Okay, so in my view, nuclear is not dead. Okay, I mean, the whatever has recently happened, it only has made things more interesting for nuclear. But the challenge we are facing is it's twofold. See, the one fold challenge is that there are people who want to ensure that there is reasonable supply of energy without disruption, and we also make significant move towards low carbon and zero carbon. But then we also have cheerleaders and people coming up where idea is like there is, yeah, I mean, we need to kill oil and gas companies, we need to kill nuclear, we need to kill everything, we only need to use solar and it has to happen now. So that is a bit adversarial. I mean, in terms of a view, I would call it a radical view. Okay, in a way. I mean, I'm not saying radical views are bad, but it's a radical view. Um, so these, I mean, the idea is like that there is a whole lobby of people who don't want nuclear. Okay, and they don't understand like what could be the outcome of it or suffering because of it. There's a whole group of people who do not want nuclear because it hurts them in a strategic way. They do not want to share nuclear technology. So these are the two biggest challenge that nuclear has to overcome in terms of focus way, along with the tactical challenge they have is, see, building a nuclear plant is not that straightforward. I mean, the
Yeah.
kind of engineering requirements you are looking, the kind of requirement in terms of cost you are looking. I mean, you're looking in billions of dollars, mega capital projects, all kind of complexities. You need to. So there is always chance of getting these projects run over cost and over time, complexity, and then you can literally never rule out the the chance of any accident. I mean, even how remote it is, and then you also have to dispose the nuclear waste. So these are the stigma. So how do you think? I mean, given all of this, how to tackle the challenge of nuclear in current era?
So the way that I would probably do it is by taking each one of those negatives and addressing them individually, right? So I think the
You are
first,
again
the
in and out.
yeah,
Just
can you hear
before
me?
when you mic.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Hello? Okay. So I
Yeah.
think the way that we tackle this is by one at a time, right? We have to take every negative point, dissect it, and see if there's an innovative solution around it. So the first one that I think, and I think the easiest one, of course, is going to be around capital and also around planning. Right. So, right now, the biggest innovations in nuclear are going towards small modular reactors. The reason why things are so capital intensive and also at the same time so intensive when it comes to a regulatory body is because the chances of meltdowns are significant. And if it's a meltdown and it's in a certain area that's close to a population center, that's even worse. So it kind of limits you on where you can place this reactor. And then once you place it further away from population centers, that means you need infrastructure going to population centers, right? So that's the other complicated thing. So the way that you would do it by by one modularizing it, making it smaller so that this way you can put it closer to population centers, right? And almost make the process of manufacturing these reactors into a much more easier and seamless way. Right now, the biggest challenge that I see, even from a safety point of view, is that if you have a mega reactor with multiple cooling towers with multiple reactors, and you have a core meltdown, that is going to cause a lot of things. Some of the newer technologies that are coming out right now are based around technology that you cannot melt down a core. So an example is there's one company that's making a core that the outside, the heat transfer mechanism is
Hey, Chris,
helium,
may I
right?
request you to change
Yeah,
your mic if you have another one, or
yeah,
use
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
headphone mic? It's
Yeah,
kind of, I mean, like breaking it at times.
it going in and out, right? Yeah. So go ahead, you talk, and
No,
I'll
so
do that.
yeah, so I mean, this is, I think, one of the big thing. I like the idea you said, and I totally agree with you. I mean, as someone who has led my capital project, I mean, uh, we need to dissect first what is the FUD around nuclear and what are the real concerns and challenges around nuclear. So what is happening? It's very easy to actually spread rumors about nuclear also because of its power. Okay, and actually it's easy to spread further for nuclear given the history than actually to do it in terms of oil and gas. So I think it needs to be tackled. The one thing which everyone has to agree and assess that we do not have means as of today to reduce 100% of our carbon footprint of energy. Okay, I think there is a, I mean, there is an idea like, okay, solar and wind will grow, and they will grow, I think. But we also need to understand that energy demand is also growing. Okay, nuclear is not renewable energy, but if done well, nuclear is low carbon, zero carbon energy. Okay, it has another footprint in terms of radioactive outcome that needs to be tackled. But taking it completely out of equation, I think, is very is very naive also. Okay, so before we go further in this discussion, because this discussion has several dimensions, let us first discuss about conventional nuclear. That means the nuclear energy that exists. And this energy that we talk about is primarily a form of a, like, what do we say, like a controlled fission. Okay, let me see if I have a B-roll to show you something on that part.
Hey
Okay,
Sachin, is my
so this
mic coming across okay now? Is the volume okay or no?
volume is okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Sorry.
So no worries. So basically, what happens is that you have a radioactive isotope, and radioactive isotope, in a simpler way to define, that they have a nucleus that is a bit unstable compared to the stable isotope version of that. Then you actually bombard it with neutron particles, and the nucleus break. Okay, to form another form, two elements. Okay, which one is probably the stable element, the stable isotopes, and another is a smaller version. I mean, a smaller. The challenge here is, I mean, because you need a particular isotopes for this. It has to be radioactive. Okay, and they are available only in. They take a lot of time to enrich and to ore in general. So they are not available in large quantities, but still significant quantities, I would say. Now, in atomic bomb versus in a nuclear reactor, the difference is, when I say the control, the main difference is that in a reaction, like when a neutron or electron strikes the nucleus, the amount of electrons and neutrons that spills out of it is actually more than one. So basically, what happens is they create more or more interactions with another nuclear another element. So it becomes what we call a chain reaction, and it goes exponential. In a controlled manner, or in a nuclear reactor, you actually control the extra electrons or extra neutrons that is coming out of it, so that the scale of a nuclear reaction stay within certain boundary condition, and that is the main difference. Okay, it's a quite an engineering challenge, but we have demonstrated proof that it exists. But this is what the conventional nuclear look like. You use heavy waters for coolant. You're dealing with really high temperature. Okay, but also in terms of, like, if you see the utility, the nuclear reactors are used in submarines. You can load it, and yeah, I mean, this is pretty much like fuels. You can forget it for like years sometimes. So that is something which is, so it has to be weighed in that response. But as of today, it is fair to say that nuclear is not popular, or at least not getting popular. Last time it happened in 1970s, that everybody went after nuclear when the first oil shock came. And now we are again in the same situation, that we are in an oil shock, and people again started realizing that why we have not done enough nuclear. The question is still, if you don't do it, the situation will come again after 1 or 2 or 3 decades, that why you have not done it enough. What do you think of conventional nuclear in general, Chris?
I think conventional nuclear is definitely dead. If you're thinking that people are going to be spending on capital projects billions of dollars, and then the timeline to get it up and running is close to a decade, then no, we're looking for more immediate solutions. And the only way you're going to get an immediate solution is that you do things that are on smaller scale, which can be built very easily, transported very easily, built around population centers very easily. And also, it's not something that we don't have experience in already. Like you said, with regards to nuclear submarines and even aircraft carriers, like all the aircraft carriers right now in the world pretty much are all powered by nuclear. There's few that are still powered by diesel, but for the most part, most of them are nuclear submarines. And the United States is really good with that. The other thing is, even in terms of like military research, it's a big topic, because one of the things is, if you're looking at a forward operated base, you want to open, let's say, a base in Afghanistan, right? How are you gonna get electricity to the base? Well, right now the only way you do it is by having giant diesel generators. And these diesel generators are a point of your weakness, right? Majority of the reason why is because all the diesel that's coming has to be taken in, flown in to the country, or transported through enemy supply lines, and also from other areas that we may not exactly be very friendly with. So I remember there was some talks that there was going to be some development around small modular reactors that literally it's on the size of a shipping container. Everything is self-contained. Literally, you would just move it right onto the base, and a Chinook helicopter could drop it right onto the base, and you got yourself electricity. There was no need to transport energy in. So the more you think about it, there's a lot of benefits to this modularization of nuclear. It just depends on who's going to be championing it. Right now, I don't see too many people willing to champion it from either the political side or from the corporate side. The closest large scale manufacturer, industrial manufacturer right now that's still in nuclear is Hitachi and Rolls-Royce. I know I just said Rolls-Royce. A lot of people are like, wait, you're telling me Rolls-Royce, like the maker of cars, the Rolls-Royce cars, they makes nuclear? Yeah, they're actually in the nuclear industry, and I think the technology is progressing, but I still think that we're about 10 years away from a fully commercial past development plant that can be scaled up and modularized. Right now, everyone is doing research. Everyone is doing demonstration units. They're trying to prove the safety. It's going to take a really long time for people to realize that nuclear is actually safe. And who knows if people end up believing it or not. The other thing is, some people are saying, well, what about skipping fission and going straight to fusion? Fusion is almost 50 years away, if you really think about it. So right now, we're not in any position where we can just go nuclear tomorrow, nor can we go nuclear right away. But there are a lot of developments in that. There's one more area that I think we can touch upon a little later, and that's the fissile material, right? Right now, majority of the nuclear power plants, they're using enriched uranium. But there's also other materials that could be used. Back in the 1950s and 60s, scientists at what do you call Cold Springs and at Livermore, where they do a lot of nuclear experimentation, they found another isotope that was actually even better, which was thorium. Right, thorium. There's so many benefits to thorium. We can discuss that later. But one of the reasons why they didn't go with thorium is because at the time, the goal was to outpace the USSR in nuclear weapons. So one of the things that you can do if you have a nuclear power plant is create enriched uranium, and then use that for weapons, in the future. So that's why we went into pretty much into a uranium world. Otherwise, we would have went to thorium. Thorium you can't make nuclear weapons out of. So a lot of times it's the military that leads the way in innovation. And usually it's good, but this time around it was bad because now we're under the uranium economy rather than the thorium nuclear economy.
Now, this is, I think, most interesting piece of information I have heard in a very long time, and I'll tell you why. I mean, like, I totally agree with you. Like, if we take so one thing is that there are existing nuclear power which countries can actually ensure for better efficiency and longevity in general. But I agree with you. Like if we start looking for nuclear in terms of major capital project, as we used to, like in terms of billions of dollars of project that takes 7 to 15 years to build, yeah, I think nuclear is already out of game from that point of view. At least in terms of a meaningful way. Okay, if we are looking in terms of a smaller scale, like for example, I remember Bill Gates came up with his idea of nuclear, that he wants to use the nuclear waste, and this is what he called. I mean, I think he had a particular name for that kind of reactor. It's actually a very funny name. The Natrium reactor. I think they came up, and a company called TerraPower is something that they felt that it is of importance. So in reality, I like the idea because uh, I like the idea because they said that they can use the nuclear waste. But somebody who has as much cash as Bill Gates and as much power in terms of lobby, because the amount of charity he is doing, and now they have agreed that they will do this first plant in Wyoming, but it has taken far longer to actually demonstrate that it can be done in a very reasonable way. And then of course they also have to fire the I mean the I mean, face the stigma that comes with all kind of nuclear activity along with it. So apart from that, I also came along some of, because like I review companies for investing. I think this is another one that I came up with Radiant, and I think this is kind of got me very interested because they are saying that they can actually do it in almost as a size of container, and I was like astonished. I don't know whether it's possible at this point or not, and I'm doing my DD on that part. But this got me into another topic, which was like on a micro nuclear technologies and solutions. So what I came out like, especially the DD for last, at least for last week, is that this is a lot of frontier tech, assuming a lot of this frontier tech to become quite big in a near future, given all the stigma that comes with nuclear, is very difficult. The second thing which I struggle in is that one company I really like a lot. And this is one of the company is Commonwealth Fusion System. And as you said, fusion is a whole frontier. Okay, like one thing is miniaturizing the existing technology and making it safe, but fusion is something, yeah, it's just not been done in a way. And one of the challenge for this is like when you generate this kind of energy, there is literally no substance, no material can hold this kind of temperature to make it control. You literally have to control it using magnetic field. Okay, so it's really cutting edge technology. If it succeeds, now actually Commonwealth Fusion System also has. Of course, I think it has investment from Bill Gates also. If I'm not wrong, it has investment from Khosla, but I don't treat them as. It's a cutting edge technology. It's pretty much has no meaning if these guys invest in it or don't invest in it. But companies like Equinor and ENI has also invested. Now these are energy companies. These are energy giants, and these companies are they have committed for net zero, and now they are saying that okay, fusion or nuclear in general is something they see as an important. And this is not like horizontal or adjacent technologies. This is, they are going completely out of their core domain to invest in it. So this is something quite. So I'm very excited about this company, but the question for me is always the same. Can the code be cracked for fusion? We
I
have
think
cracked the code for fusion, and I would say the problem of miniaturizing fission is simpler than cracking the code of fusion. I could be wrong on this, but based on whatever I know, and I do have a couple of degree in physics also, so
no,
not
no,
that naive also.
you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. When it comes to fusion, there's too much energy output in the current version that we're trying. The one that the so the holy grail of fusion is cold fusion, right? The way that cold fusion works is that literally you're just passing electricity into a reactor and you're getting more electricity output than what you're putting in. There was a experiment that was done, and some say that it happened, but they could never repeat it, right? And essentially it was a really cool concept, but it didn't work. The hardest part is the the part of fusion that they were trying to demonstrate was that you would put in 10, imagine putting in something that's 10 and getting 100 out, and there's no excess heat, there's no excess pollution, there's nothing. It's hard to do that. The version of fusion that we're actually trying to do is making, two, like, two atoms pretty much collide, right? And you have to guide them together. It's not just one of those things that you can do very easily. So it's right now the biggest and the most advanced research in fusion is being done by ITER, and that's ITER. It's an international cooperation to try to get fusion to be more commercialized, right? They have a giant reactor in France right now where literally every country has been spending, billions of dollars to try to figure this out, because that is literally the holy grail of energy. If you can crack the code on fusion, let me tell you, the world would be a much better place. You could turn the sands and deserts into forests, because then you could just desalinate the water at will because you have cheap abundant energy, and literally just water everything, right? Same thing with growing food. Every single thing that requires energy right now would just go away. So the concept and the dream is so big, like it literally would revolutionize the world. But like I said, we're still maybe 50 years, and believe it or not, it may be something that's not even possible. That's the other thing too. There are certain scientists that say nuclear fusion in our atmosphere is not only dangerous, but it's not feasible, because of all the restrictions around it. So I would say we are at the very beginning of nuclear fusion, and it's not something that we can honestly plan around and do. I think right now everyone should be looking at small modular reactors. That's like the area of the greatest output and value that can be generated from the least amount of input. And like I said, there's already technology that exists. Right now, it's already in demonstration phases. So I think if there was more support from some really big commercial people and some politicians, I think it could actually work. I'll give you an example. I think Elon Musk, if pushed hard enough, will probably end up going into the nuclear business. And I know that sounds very controversial to say, but at the end of the day, if you look at all the companies that he's built, they're pretty much built around the concept of getting to Mars and starting a colony on Mars. There is no other fuel source that you can take from Earth in an economical way and have an operating base in the middle of Mars. The only thing you have is nuclear, right? Where literally you can take small batches of high-grade uranium, right, that's been enriched, and take it with you and still provide enough electricity to power a base on Mars. There's nothing else that can do it. You can't take water and turn it into hydrogen and use that. Like, how many solar panels are you going to possibly need over there? The other thing is you can't build a factory because none of the other materials are there, like silicon, everything. So the whole Mars mission, believe it or not, does not rely even a tenth on the rockets to get there, because we can already get there. It's actually going to be, how do we get nuclear to Mars, and how do we make it so that it can survive the impact of landing on Mars as well. So that's what I would say. Hopefully Elon Musk takes the challenge on, because I think he's one of those innovative people that can actually crack the code on how to make small modular reactors more, more accepted by general public and society. It was the same thing with the electric car. Everyone had written electric cars off until Elon Musk proved them wrong. And so I think if nuclear was to get a patron in Elon Musk, I think it could make a resurgence, and very quickly too.
I think that's a very good example of strategic thinking, Chris. I mean, the way you explained it, I think it's amazing. I think I would agree with this. I mean, first thing is that the code of fission versus fusion, I think fission code is correct. It has at least some acceptance and some sort of a kind of an agreement, at least in selected club of countries. So getting a miniaturized version working and at least being deployed in some of these countries is a fair bet. Whether it can be done at a scale, I think that is something to be seen. But I would say that it's a fair bet that it can be done. The code of fusion, and I have to make a confession here. I think very few people who are very close to me knows this. See, I did my graduation in mathematics and physics, and that particular time I was trying to prepare for IIMs. My idea was to go to MBA. Now this is 96, 97. Okay, I had a issue with my knee that required some sort of major surgery, and it could only happen like once I'm like 19, 20. My height has stopped and everything. It was quite a painful episode for me. And when I had my surgery and I was in rehabilitation, I mean, the only thing that mattered to me was to walk again. And I pondered all kind of different questions in my life, like, do I really want to do MBA? I mean, I'm a physicist, and I really science is something that excites me. Maybe I'm going for MBA because I'm more in, I mean, like peer pressures of a high-paying job and things like that. During that time, I watched this movie. This is a Keanu Reeves movie called Chain Reaction. Okay, Chain Reaction is a movie that is a kind of a cold fusion kind. So this is a technology, and there is another movie called Saint. I mean, so the cold fusion in terms of technology has always excited me, and that movie actually kind of, I wouldn't say inspired, but it was a part of a thought process that sent me again to go the world of physics, and eventually ended up joining the geophysics in IIT, and that pretty much led my career thereafter. So fascination for cold fusion is real. I have seen it in my life. It has inspired me. Uh, is it possible? My worry is following. Okay, I don't want to go into conspiracy theories. I'm thinking strategic. So I want to stay as objective as possible. See, if you have a source of energy that is widely available and can be accessed by anyone, the wealth of a lot of companies on their balance sheet and the global power that controls politics in a certain way will be broken. So a lot of parties and a lot of people actually have incentive to not to make these technologies popular. Like for example, I mean, like for example, like you saw, like the example you cited in terms of thorium. And the idea was that, I mean, like when I hear you from like what you say in terms of thorium, when I hear in terms of what is happening in miniaturization, nuclear technology, and safety, I see, to me it's a good strategic fit. But think about this, like for example, if countries are not dependent over each other in for energy as they are today, yeah, world is going to be a very different place. And as far as we are not ruled by scientists, we are ruled by politicians, and politicians are not that akin for change. So it's a bad place to be. I mean, if these kind of technologies exist, so let me frame it in a different way. That means there is a world where nuclear is accepted, okay, despite its stigma, where it can provide a meaningful use. But nuclear to become something that can completely change energy in a very dimensional way, I think that will get a lot of resistance from a lot of people, and because of its stigma, they might succeed also. Like I said in the early part, I do not see us in a going out of Earth in a very sustained way without being harnessing nuclear power. So nuclear power has to go with us when we go out. Okay, people can call it a sci-fi. People can call it. I mean, but yeah, I mean this is something. And if Elon Musk is planning to go and attempting to go for Mars and other thing, he has to carry some sort of nuclear energy in some forms. Okay, the whole idea that everything will be based on solar and hydrogen, based on the water. I mean, even it needs energy to produce hydrogen. Right now, this is the biggest challenge everybody is facing: is that hydrogen, the amount of energy you need for hydrogen, and we covered it in our last discussion, is actually more than the hydrogen, the equivalent energy you produce. So you cannot be in a negative energy domain if you are outside Earth in a space voyage. So the role of nuclear in my way, or the way I think, is it has to be in three steps. The first step is we have to start moving away from this large, like the Adam is saying, we need to get away from these old projects. I totally agree with you. We need to make technology more acceptable. We need to use fuel that cannot be used in a certain way for nuclear weapons. Okay, we need to at least broaden the nuclear club. Okay, we like it, we don't like it, but I mean, either having nuclear powers only with certain countries and the global order it has made, I mean, it cannot stay forever. I mean, either we end up fighting with each other on the earth until we are gone as a species, or we really need to go out. The second part is that we need people like Elon Musk or someone actually to make meaningful contribution on some of these frontier problems. I like what CFS is doing. I mean, really love the work they have done. I have seen a lot of papers what they have written, and though I believe that the code for fusion is still far ahead, but I am happy that somebody is actually taking it in a meaningful way, and they are getting traction from industry as well. I'm very excited about what I mean. Like the only project that Bill Gates ever got me excited. Okay, I mean, I rate Bill Gates as a below average investor in impact investing. I'm a big fan of him, what he has done in terms of vaccine distribution by providing funds, but I do not consider Bill Gates as a good investor. I mean, I consider him a really great software programmer and what he has done, but I mean, I have to be objective. But one project of Bill Gates that got me excited was when he came with his Natrium molten salt reactor. Okay, I mean, and but the challenge I'm seeing is that even with all of his power and all of his money, even he's not able to make it. So if he cannot do it, how is it? It's not easy for others to do it as well.
It's unfortunate, but there's a point in some people's careers where, and especially some people's reputations, that conspiracy almost takes in. And I know that it sounds stupid, but it's worth talking about. There's a saying that happened in Batman. I don't know if you know. It's called "You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain." And I think Bill Gates at this point, there's so many conspiracy theories around Bill Gates. Like, you won't believe how many people won't get a vaccine because Bill Gates is somehow involved. Like, oh, the richest man in the world, even though he's not anymore, says that I need to get a vaccine. He's only doing it because of such and such. This is, I know it sounds outlandish, but there's this conspiracy of people that says anything that Bill Gates is involved in is to basically like almost like do social planning. I don't know if you've heard of that before, or have you heard any conspiracy theories
I have
around
heard
it?
of it. I mean, I have heard of it. I have a whole view on the social planning and issues that Silicon Valley runs. Okay, but I mean, I'm an ESG fund advisor, so this is something that I have to consider. But yeah, I agree. I mean, like
Yeah,
it's so if so I mean, like even like aside all the conspiracy theories, I
yeah,
mean, it's a fair bet that Bill Gates has not yet achieved the scale or the implementation. Like now,
yeah,
I wish them success for their Wyoming project and everything, but this is something which is a challenge, and a lot of people
yeah,
have actually raised concern over it as well because the stigma is still real. But the
yeah,
beauty of the Bill Gates project I like, despite all of my criticism for him, is that it is based on using the existing nuclear waste. And in my view, it's not about just nuclear energy, it's about using sustainable resources for nuclear energy. So that is why I got a lot of excitement of this project. And I really want this project to succeed. Let me be very
yeah,
honest. I mean, I believe
yeah.
if this project can succeed, I mean, it's really good for a lot of people overall.
For me,
Midwest
I
is,
would. For me, I think for me, I like I said, I think a power player like Elon getting into the industry would probably do it the most amount of good, because Elon Musk has industrial chops that Bill Gates doesn't, right? Bill Gates is still a software guy. Like, a lot of the stuff that people will say about it, and it's not his industry. I feel like at this point, Elon Musk has the reputation of being, industrial, and he's always said, "I'm an engineer first," and nuclear falls right back, right into that zone of influence. So, like I said, I really want Elon to seriously take a crack at nuclear, even if it's not just in like like doing the research himself or starting a company himself, but to at least put a little bit of weight of his name behind nuclear, and do something. Like an example is the Boring Company. While he's not an active member of doing everything with the Boring Company, he does lend his name to it and even started the company. So I think if Elon were to go that route, I think it could be big. I think that would lead to the resurgence of nuclear right away. Not to say that, the people that are already working on it, they're not doing a good job. I just think that we need a cheerleader, to really bring the industry to light. That's what I would say.
No, I think that's fair. So, is it fair to say that at this particular point, the biggest challenge? I mean, let's do it a bit of SWOT here. So, strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threat. So if we am, and let me go with my version first. So, if I'm looking for a strength, I'm looking for a piece of technology that can really create energy in immense amount in places where no other energy can exist. I mean, this is really big. I think that's one of the biggest strengths. And if it can be miniaturized, I mean, it can really change the whole global order of energy. In terms of weaknesses, what we are seeing is that it's really, I mean, it is rocket science, it's nuclear science, it is frontier of frontier. We need some of the smartest mind, and the way society is going and spending more time on social media, I don't think we are getting that many smart minds to actually be inspired to do these things. Like, I mean, I remember, like, I got inspired by chain reaction to move, and inspired to prepare for IIT and to actually take a subject in physics. uh, I mean, it at least got me better than where I was, okay, or what I could have done in my life. But I mean, that is something that is missing at this particular point. In terms of opportunities, I see the area of like miniaturization, the renewed interest in space science and space economy that can trigger some new research in it. And in terms of threat, like I said, the low trust between different countries in terms of nuclear technology, the past stigma and the failure of some of the projects in past, like Chernobyl and Fukushima, for whatever reason. That is how I see. So the only way I see nuclear to become more meaningful moving forward is that, like you said, first, we need a poster boy for nuclear. Bill Gates is probably not the poster boy. Also, Bill Gates has not proven his prowess in impact investing. It's a good idea. I'm really behind it, but it has to become. So that is one thing. The second thing is we really need a couple of countries to get behind it. Right now, what is happening is that countries and a lot of people in liberal politics, they don't want to touch nuclear. Okay, nuclear is not part of many green energy plan. Okay, so we really need one or two countries. Like at this point, like China is one of the countries that is behind. India is trying to do it, but they are doing it for a strategic reason. They are not doing it for to make a world a better place with nuclear energy. Also, their idea is more inwards on that part. So third is we want companies to come and say, "Ki, we want this technology to process." Right now, what is happening because of all the ESG play? I mean, it's easier to drop or to endorse your name with a green technology versus a nuclear technology. Okay, and you'll be surprised. I mean, in my ESG circle, what I have seen, and sometimes I get into this discussion, and people say, "Okay, you know what, we'll endorse this topic and that will improve our ESG rating." And I was like surprised. I mean, guys, are you really serious that you want to improve your ESG rating by endorsing what is the most popular thing, instead of having a sit back and think what the purpose should be and how you would be doing things? So these are the real big bottlenecks I see in terms of nuclear. And I really want nuclear to go mainstream, but I'm seeing that the headwinds are quite serious at this particular time. I mean, there is an excitement, there's a discussion, but nuclear may not see its moment of shining with the way things are ongoing. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think the first thing that you just said, one of the biggest drawbacks of nuclear right now is that it's got terrible PR, right? If public relations is a huge part of getting people on board with whatever you're trying to do. No matter how much innovation that you have, if you don't get the people behind you, it's never going to take off. So I think the PR issue needs to be solved. Even before the technical part, the PR problem, if you don't get around that, then the rest is not going to do very well. The good thing is, and you mentioned it, is that the strategic nature of nuclear and the advantages strategically that a country would get by having an energy independent landscape is huge, right? It should be part of every single country's national defense policy to be energy independent. Why would you want to be dependent on another country? Why would you want to have that level of defense dependency that people could capitalize on and cripple your economy, right? If you look at the Japanese, and I'm surprised that they're making that same mistake because of Fukushima again, with regards to being beholden by outside countries for their energy security, right? Energy security is not should be considered as general security. So China right now is making a lot of these nuclear power plants because it knows if it's going to get to 2050, it's going to need an alternative source of energy. But on top of it, they need an alternative source of energy that's not coming from another country, that other country can just cut off, and then they're stuck, right? Right now, every European country is having a difficulty with the Russians because guess what? They're dependent on Russian energy for 40, especially Germany, for almost 40% of their energy usage. So that is a huge point of vulnerability right now. So, with regards to nuclear, if nuclear is going to help bridge the gap and let countries become energy independent, that could be huge. I know from a public policy perspective, India is taking a very big role in developing non-traditional nuclear reactors, and the ones that I specifically said was thorium. India has probably the largest deposits of thorium in the world, right? So it's one of those things where you don't even have to rely on some countries who hold the ring of uranium, because there's uranium isn't everywhere, by the way. So that's the other thing too, right? If you go with nuclear and your entire country is running on nuclear and you're dependent on the uranium cartel, then you're kind of, no matter what, you're screwed. So you have to come up with things that play into your strength. So yeah, I think right now nuclear is definitely going to be developed by some of the countries that you normally wouldn't think of. I think India is well on its way. Before, it was a lot of the research was pretty much to get to the bomb, because any country that has a nuclear bomb ends up becoming, what's the word, like almost uninvadable. I don't want to say that because it's not 100%, but it's really hard to invade a country
It's a
that has
deterrence.
nuclear weapons. It's
I
a
mean,
big deterrent.
it's a big
Yeah.
deterrence. I mean, I agree with you. I mean, like I remember, like the China did a nuclear test. I think it was in 1996. I was just like in my first year of graduation. I mean, being Indian, it concerned me. Okay, so I mean, I agree. It's a bit of deterrence. I think our buddy Cyberfam is in the house, and let me take his question now. So the you mentioned about the Kandu reactors, and let me just put some of these this page in front of everyone so that everyone can read what I have is. So I mean, Shabri, one of the biggest concern I have with Kandu reactor is it's in the wrong country at this particular time, given the kind of liberal government you guys are having. Let me be very clear on this. I don't chew my words. I always prefer to be direct. See, if you see in terms of like technology, it's an efficient technology, or it's an efficient version of conventional technology. Now, conventional technology, people are already having a struggle in terms of mega capital projects, in terms of getting the right public and policy behind it. And given what we have in Canada of this today, and I don't mean it to in a way to criticize it. I'm taking it in a very strategic way that I find it very difficult that the current government will increase or will expand this in a very meaningful way. Okay, they will. So nuclear technology is a strategic, so a lot of countries spend. A lot of everyone wants to have some sort of nuclear energy expertise, because in case the world goes into a dystopian mode, it's going to be quite strategic. Okay, but using can-do reactors to change the world altogether, uh, with what view and the policies Mr. Justin Trudeau has at this particular point, I see it as a less probability this point. So yeah, so let's see, man. How do you react on can-do reactor, Chris?
No, you hit it right on the head. It just, there are times where policymakers are behind the times, right? They don't understand the value of certain things, and they don't get behind it. Like, how many years did it take the US government to get behind electric cars? Even though Elon Musk has been, screaming it at the top of his lungs that, hey, we need to have this product. So I think what it is We need governments, and it's weird because Elon Musk is fighting against the Republicans who are like, oh, you know what? We need to always be on oil, right? Like drill, baby, drill. Like, no, we need to move away from that too. So it's one of those things where um, I don't even know how to frame it, to be honest with you. Um, yeah, I think the can-do reactors, from what I can see, they're very promising. They can actually do really help. But at this current time, it's in the wrong country. If this was in the hands of the French, dude, the French are probably the three countries that have the most amount of per capita electricity being generated by nuclear. Number one is France. Almost 70% of France's electricity is generated by nuclear power plants. Not a lot of people think of France as a nuclear powerhouse, but out of all the European countries, the French are the least likely to be hit by this issue with Russia, because they produce their own electricity, right? The French are like, whatever, don't matter. We don't get half of our energy from an adversary. The others are the Finnish and the Swedish. They're also really big with nuclear, right? Not as big as France, but they also have really big nuclear programs. So I think there is definitely there's definitely a lot of players out there that could do more. And I think some of the technology that's being developed, if they took it seriously and they started adopting it, I think a lot of other countries will follow along. I guess the biggest challenge right now is, how do we get these developing countries involved in nuclear without giving them access to the technology to make a nuclear weapon? That's, I think, a really hard thing. And that's why I think thorium would be the route to go to, where you don't have a fissile material being a byproduct of the enrichment process, in which case, people would feel safer about adopting nuclear.
At least from the at least from the nuclear bomb point of view, that this technology cannot be converted into a bomb. I mean,
like right now, the Iranians would love to have a nuclear. Like the Iranians have been screaming, like, we need a nuclear reactor. We need a nuclear reactor. But you think the Israelis are targeting the scientists? They're like, no. If there's one country that cannot have the nuclear bomb, it's this country. And it's kind of the same thing. There's also rivalries between countries that will prevent the development of nuclear, because they're like, oh, my neighbors, it's too suspicious for them to have it. So I think nuclear is, a lot of people still have a lot of stigma towards it. It's got PR issues all over the place. So I don't know if nuclear is going to ever become a huge reality in the short term. Maybe in the future, or maybe we'll all just die from the polar ice caps melting. I don't know.
yeah. So is it fair to say that until and unless there is a sufficient evidence that by technology that can show that either the technology can be miniaturized in a meaningful way, at least in terms of fission, or we get an acceptance of fusion with some frontier key technology breaks? Because I don't expect politicians to trust each other, let me be honest. And if politicians are not sharing nuclear technology for whatever reasons, I think it will not change. I mean, history is any evidence that this is literally not going to happen. So the only way you make it acceptance at a very large level is that you take the risk factor out of it. I like the idea, like you mentioned, in terms of thorium, that a thorium reactor, that could be something. But we do not have a poster boy of nuclear right now. We do not have a company that is putting his waste, like we saw the BlackRock came and said, guys, enough is enough, everybody has to go ESG, and everybody start scrambling. First, people thought that BlackRock is not serious about it, but we don't have anyone who is putting. Elon has put his name behind nuclear, and despite he knows that all the stigma will come, but we know Elon is Elon. He speaks his mind, and that's why we all love him.
Here's a question. Does nuclear fit into ESG?
This is also a question I want to ask as well, because that's what I said. I think I wrote a paper on this some time back, and I said that ESG definitions are broken at this particular point. Okay, like for example, ESG definition of Silicon Valley and Wall Street is very different from some of the ESG definition you will see. Like a lot of things which Silicon Valley put their weight behind, people in Asia, they don't think that's a social or sustainable thing they want to attach themselves. Okay, is it right or wrong? It's a different view, but like 3 months back, even oil and gas was not fitting in ESG. Now, some people are saying that energy security should be part of sustainability. So, people who are even pushing ESG at this particular point, see, ESG needs a broader debate. And that is what is not happening. Right now, what is happening is that people trying to push, or companies trying to push their weight behind that this is what the ESG is, and end of story. Think from my point of view, Chris. When I live in Southeast Asia, okay, I mean Southeast Asia, the like if I look at countries, I mean countries are very religiously dominated. Okay, even if I go and tell them that we are going to do an investment in this company and they have endorsed LGBTQ pride, for investors it doesn't make that kind of ring. These are the ground realities. Okay, you need to, we talk about like we need to raise awareness and all that, but this is, world is not Silicon Valley. Okay, for them their idea is okay, that's fine. Okay, we agree with that, but are these companies investing money in rural education? Now if you start seeing that how many of Silicon Valley companies actually invest money in rural education or topics like this or clean water, you will find 80 to 90% companies don't, but they have a very good ESG ratings. Okay, so then what happens is like same thing, like when you talk about events, okay, and there are social events which are very important to Americans, but they are not important to people who are outside America. For them it's just a war between two news channels, between Fox versus CNN. So how is it possible to have an ESG view that is derived by only few companies and few people? And that is why we need more debates on ESG. Like, I mean, I was in Nigeria. I have seen the situation on ground. Okay, every day I travel, I also think what will make, I mean, to make the life of people better here. Okay, I mean, you go there and you talk about topics. If you see historical emissions, 90% of historical emissions have come from only selected countries. But now every country has to go to net zero 2050 from the mandate that is coming. See, if someone has done more pollution in past, don't you think they should do more? But so let's not look at the past. So I mean, there are views. So ESG at this particular point has to have a far broader debate than what it is today. I disagree with a lot of things that is being discussed. In my view, the way I see that for a sustainable world, abundant energy is critical. And also, I mean, at some point of time, it is also important for us to go out of Earth. Okay, and that cannot happen without nuclear. So in my personal view, I think nuclear should be part of ESG. Okay, responsible nuclear. Okay, not like the nuclear we have seen the nuclear race in Cold War, not in that way. Okay, back to you.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think nuclear definitely fits into the ESG principles. It's one of those fuels that no matter what we do, we're going to have to eventually move to anyway. There are bridge fuels and bridge technologies, but nothing that's going to get us there as quick as nuclear, right? And it's a technology that's already here. So it's not like it's going to take like a whole bunch of other extra things. So yeah, no, I agree with you. I think nuclear should be a part of ESG. I'm having a tough time understanding ESG, to be honest with you, because of so many loopholes in ESG.
A lot of people. I mean, to be honest, I'll be very honest with you, and it's an uncomfortable thing to say for a lot of people, but let me tell you, what is ESG for most of people as of today is to endorse the popular topic is going on rather than making anything meaningful change. A lot of people will go and say that, okay, we support this, we support that. That's fine, guys. But are you going to make it purpose of your company, or you're going to change it meaningfully? Okay, I have been in so many meetings where people will just go and say, why don't we endorse these 5 things, and at least for the short term, we are done with ESG. I disagree with that. My idea is like, if you cannot take ESG in a meaningful way for a long-term view, it's everything you are doing is just whitewashing here and there. And this is one of the challenges. I mean, ESG at this time is broken. Okay, ESG ratings for the company that are been running in Wall Street and Silicon, they are broken. There is no scope of discussion. There is no scope of inclusivity. That what topics are important for people in Latin America, what are their challenges, how people in Africa are struggling, what are the issues in Middle East or Southeast Asia or Asia in general. These topics have no place in ESG. These people are not even invited on the table to discuss the ESG framework at this point. So it is not going to work in the current way. Okay. Hey, thanks, Cyberfam. I was displaying this. So Midwest Cannabis has sponsored himself as the sponsor boy of nuclear. Man, now we need you to go to Joe Rogan and have a joint there and discuss this with Joe Rogan how it is going to happen. Yeah. So I mean, this is true. Like for example, and I discussed this earlier as well. The policy making, okay, is lacking in terms of nuclear. Okay, we do not have a country, at least the open country that's part of free world in a way that says that we should accept nuclear as a larger piece of technology. That doesn't exist. We are seeing in terms of EV, we are seeing in terms of green technologies. So we don't have, and we also don't have any promoter like somebody like Elon or someone who put his energy behind it. I mean, of course, Bill Gates has tried to put his energy and his money behind the nuclear topic, but Bill Gates being Bill Gates, uh, yeah, he's not the ideal poster boy for a lot of people. And forget the poster boy theory also for a minute. I mean, he is yet to prove his idea is realistic in terms of scalability. So until and unless that is done, I will cut him a slack on that part.
Here's a question too. What should our next topic be? You know, I think nuclear is a great topic, but I think it's so far away from people's minds as being an acceptable reality that it's hard to talk about it, because it's, to me, it's frustrating because it's the obvious answer, yet no one wants to talk about it. You know what I mean? So what else can we talk? What else is there? What other forms of energy can we go? Because I see a basket. I think that's the only other way that we can go into the future in a decarbonized way without creating an economic tsunami of bad effects. What do you think? What do you think our next time? To me, it should be nuclear. It should be natural gas. I think natural gas is worth talking about. Unless, did we talk about natural gas already? Then we're stuck. Then we have to find something else.
So I think there is another thing is like there are two ways to look at future. And like say, I mean, before we decide anything, we need to have a view on future. The view on future is abundant energy where one energy source is competing with each other. In that particular sense, it is fair to say which energy source is more important. Or the another view of future is that we are short of energy. In that particular case, what becomes that any energy source that you can get is important. The third view of future is that you have to be selective how you select energy sources, because you have to be tactical. It has to be low carbon, but it has to be sufficient enough. I think that's pretty much what the world is moving around. So in that particular case, what happens is we end up with basket of energies. Okay, and like I said, if you remember our discussion from the hydrogen, especially in blue hydrogen, I said that at this point, we do not have certainty that we will have sufficient low carbon, net zero carbon energy. Given people say, oh, nature has plenty of energy. Yes, nature has plenty of energy. Question is, can we use it in a meaningful economic way? Okay, so there is a fair chance we end up with this basket of energy for a very long time. And I know people want to replace oil and gas. Guys, the oil and gas is here because it cannot be just replaced overnight. Okay, we have not even discussed the petrochemical purposes and usage. I would love to replace fossil fuel overnight if possible. The thing is, it cannot be. So if it cannot be, what would you want to do? You want to do it in a meaningful way. Okay, how we do it in a meaningful way, or you just want to go and throw a tantrum like a teenager that it has to be done today? It cannot be. That's a reality. Yes, Cyberfam, we discussed about Bill Gates, and I shared my view on him that I rate him as a very below average investor, but I'm a big fan of his approach on what he is doing with TerraPower. I want to give him all kind of benefit of doubt until unless this technology is proven, because if this technology comes out and they can really use this molten salt reactor to generate electricity out of radioactive waste, I will be all up for it. But until and unless it is done, I'm just keeping my excitement under control. Uh, yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, see, ESG is ESG. There are only two ways ESG can exist. I mean, the ESG is either going to be the way of life, or it is going to be just another buzzword. I mean, this is how I see these things. And at this point, ESG is more a buzzword than people see. There are people who are really putting their energy behind it. There are people who really wants to make world a better place. But what is happening is because of its popularity, there are also a lot of people who are endorsing things who really don't have that kind of commitment, who are just they're just trying to make a brownie point or just to become good in terms of rating. And that is the challenge right now. The frameworks are not able to separate these kind of people. What do you think, Chris, on ESG in general? Like I say, what is happening is we are in the middle of people who really want to make change, but the narrative has been overtaken by people who are running a scam at the name of ESG. What do you
I
think?
I think ESG, the idea and the concept is good. The execution is bad. Like, there's no real way that you're going to be able to, execute this without getting some standardizations that everyone can get behind. You know, it's one of those, and this happens to a lot of feel good policies, and that's exactly what they are. They're feel good policies where people want to feel good about themselves, that they're making a difference, but essentially they're just empowering incumbents. I wouldn't be surprised if ESG is being pushed by incumbent incumbent industries to slow down progress in innovation. I mean, I've seen that happen in my industry in healthcare where, you think that some of these incumbents, like companies that already have products, they're looking out for the best of everybody who's the customer at this point, by making sure that the regulators are always raising the bar on what's necessary. No, what they're doing is stopping the smaller players from coming in and competing because there's such a high hurdle rate for adoption of any new technology, right? So I think that's what ESG is. To me, it's creating barriers to not let innovators through the door, and letting the incumbents keep their market share without having to innovate themselves. That's I know that sounds controversial, but
No, it makes sense, man. I really appreciate G10 sharing for Michael Schallenberger. I mean, I haven't followed him. I mean, I will try to definitely look what he is doing, because see, nuclear. We are talking something that is equivalent to rocket science. Okay, and if we leave the decision on the people in terms of who are fake scientists, like a fake scientist that has been promoted by several media channels on different views, yeah, I think it's pretty much dead on arrival. So we really need some cutting edge people I mean, like, we not only need Elon Musk, we also need Alex Carr, because it's not only a technology topic; it's a philosophical topic also, and it has to be framed. We need these kind of people to actually frame this topic around. So at this particular point, my concern for nuclear is that the kind of politics we are having in the world in terms of green energy, in terms of see, I'm someone who is up for green energy, but I'm also a realist that what can happen or what cannot happen in a given frame of time. And my view is that by taking nuclear out of equation, actually we are making things difficult for a zero carbon world. This is how I think of a situation. But I'm not very hopeful of nuclear given the kind of politics and policy we are at this particular point. So I am concerned that nuclear might never see the its brightest hour. Okay. What do you think, Chris?
no, that's absolutely true. I think there's a lot of technologies out there that they could be utilized for the greater good, but you know, there are a lot of challenges that other people are bringing up. Like, I'll give you an example. The founder of the Sierra Club was very pro nuclear because what they were saying was, look, if we I don't know if anyone knows what Sierra Club is. Sierra Club is probably one of the largest organizations fighting for the environment, right? Like, they fight for keep. Go ahead. Can you pull them up, Sachin? Yeah. The thing is, they started being pro-nuclear, and eventually they just kind of switched it up and went the opposite. I don't know what the reasoning behind it was, but like I said, there's a lot of people who flipped on nuclear. I know a lot of scientists actually flipped on nuclear too, because it was one of those topics that kind of almost got them what's the word, like blackballed from proper society. So like right now, if a lot of scientists, if they have an opinion on nuclear and it's something that's like one of those words that you can't say, then they'll be blackballed from any sort of gathering of environmentalists. So it's weird. It's such an it's such a I don't know. There's too much there's too much there's too much focus on politics internally, even within the scientific community, rather than reason, which is kind of sad. But this is the world we live in, so I don't know.
So I have a question, Chris. I mean, because like what I've seen in that, and then I'll take the question from Shabri as well. That these kind of clubs and these kind of I don't know. I was trying to go to their website. Somehow I was blocked. I hope I'm not on their radar. So these kind of clubs, and what happens is that they have influence. If then they generate influence, then people from different kind of lobbyists, they infiltrate them as well, and they try to use them to drive a certain narrative as well. So sometimes a lot of these clubs and a lot of these organizations are not true to their objective from where they started, and that's my concern a lot of time. Okay, I mean, I've seen what George Soros is doing with his open democracy movement, where it started with something very noble, but now at places it has become quite an interference in some of the functioning democracies. Okay, again, it's my view. Okay, I mean, based on what I have seen, but that's my concern. So I agree with the Rethink X. I mean, in terms of Tony Seba in journal, and I have seen in BCG in all of my research, I've seen that, and I have made statements to my clients that based on data I have seen in the research I have done, that the offshore wind or wind in general and solar will be the cheapest source of energy in most of the part of the world. I mean, I agree with that. The challenge is not the cheapest energy here. The challenge is to use this cheapest energy in order to use in a meaningful way that it is abundant for everyone and it can sustain in the grid. So grids as of this point has not been adapted in terms of like what we generally say, we need a very distributed kind of grid system if we want to make large scale renewables to go. That investment is needed. The another challenge for that is, and I have discussed this in past and I kind of scribbled also, that we have to be very clear what kind of grid system and energy system we are going. Are we going to use the solar and wind for the base level demand, and then we use for the variable in terms of like a gas power? Is that the world we want to go? Because if that's the world we are not going, then we need to invest more on the grid storage. And if we don't want to invest on grid storage, but we still want to do the large scale renewables, then we have to produce green hydrogen on marginal cost. The policy is still not very clear around it. I mean, one thing is for sure that these two technologies will be the cheapest source of energy in if not already in places in next 10 years. There will be a lot of supply chains, but they still need to address these engineering challenge. When you everything has a trade-off, and this is the trade-off that comes with it. So I hope that explained the point, because that is what make people struggle. This is what happened. Like people who have done the cheerleading for green energy, instead of thinking, they have over promised things, and because of this over promise and policy making, they have ended up making decisions. For example, shutting down nuclear in places in like Germany. Now this is a question German people have to ask themselves and answer for themselves. Are they okay shutting down nuclear and then getting blackmailed by Russia? Okay, you shut down nuclear, you go all green, that's fine. But now you got into a situation where you got into this catch 22. Do you think it's sustainable, or is it something that they want? That is the question they have to answer for themselves. Being an outsider, we can have view about it, because what happens in the energy world, it has reverberations for everyone. But this is a question for Germans for themselves. They have to tell whether they are okay with it or not. Back to you, Chris.
I agree. I agree. At this point, the Germans and a lot of Eastern Europe is going to have to decide like what their energy future is going to look like, right? I know the U.S. is already starting to get kind of lobbied to be more facilitative to having natural gas be exported to the Europeans to make up for the difference of cutting away from Russia. But that's still at least 6, maybe 10 years away from being a reality. So what are you going to do until then? And like I said, do you still want to be do you want to be economically dependent on the Americans for your energy too? You know, you never know. I mean, that's the other thing. It's just a pain point for any country. So the Europe, I I have to say, what was Angela Merkel thinking? Like, she's an engineer by heart. Like, why would she allow the Germans to become so dependent on the Russians via Nord Stream 1 and 2? Like, it just didn't make sense to me when they did it that time, and it didn't make sense to me even when she was leaving. Now all of a sudden they're, I don't know, just either the Europeans are too focused, especially the Germans. They're very pragmatic, but they're also making some dumb moves recently. I don't know why. Even from a military standpoint, they weren't contributing to their full amount, and now all of a sudden they have to double their defense budgets. You know, everyone is like, "Oh my God, Russia!" Like, no, Putin's not different. Putin was around 20 years ago. What made them think that you could trust this guy? You know, I don't know. I think that's a very interesting question with the molten salt reactor. Um, can you put that back up again? Are you familiar with the Professor Donald from MIT has a startup, Ambry, that's building a molten electricity storage? So molten salts are great, even in certain solar projects. Molten salt is used. Molten salt, if anyone here doesn't know, where basically you can heat it up and it retains energy for much longer periods of time, right? So an example is if you have a solar thermal plant where you're heating up the molten salt, it's in a liquid state, but it can retain that energy and still produce electricity overnight, right? If you're using something like water, water will dissipate its heat very quickly. And if it dissipates its heat very quickly, that ends up discharging, and now you're out of electricity. So molten salt is definitely a great energy transfer mechanism, but it doesn't take away from all the negatives of nuclear that people are going to highlight. So I like molten salt. I think it's a good concept, but there's definitely some things that you won't get away from in terms of like safety considerations. Sachin, I think you're on mute.
Sorry, man. Man, I think I love MIT, man. The TerraPower also came up, and they said that their technology is also based on molten salt. I mean, CFS is a result of MIT. I mean, this thing Embry is coming out of MIT. I mean, man, MIT is the place. I think as soon as my daughter goes to college, I think I should apply for PhD. I mean, I'm practically done in terms of things I want to do in my life. I mean, I would love to go to do PhD in MIT. I wouldn't mind going back to my physicist route and spend some time doing these things with. Yeah, I agree. And so I have one question. I think this is one of the questions which I have really want to take. See, this is true that the natural gas production, I mean, the amount of methane leaks and all, natural gas, the way it is done, I mean, it's lower carbon compared to oil, but it's not zero carbon. It is, at the end of the day, you get net carbon going back. And if you do not do the projects well, you have the methane leak going into the atmosphere. That's a challenge. But guys, this is one question that people don't ask me is that what about if we capture the methane leaks globally? Because whether you produce methane or gas or not, nature produces a lot of methane that goes to atmosphere. And one of the biggest source for methane is always the gas hydrates. Now, this is one of the most sensitive topic that no one talks about. Okay, so we know this idea that when temperature increase, at least in terms of global warming, it also makes oceans to produce more methane. Now, people try to look at it another way. People who are against global warming, they say because oceans are producing more methane, that's why global warming is happening. I don't want to go into that debate, but the thing is, ocean produce a lot of methane, and a lot of this methane actually comes from gas hydrates. And a lot of countries like India, China, Japan, Australia, they actually have tried a lot of time to actually harness these gas. I mean, if you can harness the gas hydrates from ocean, it's huge. It's huge amount of technology. And guys, if you do not harness this gas hydrates from oceans, it will go to atmosphere. So the question in that particular case is, what is better? Is to let these methane to go to atmosphere over the time, or shall we really go and harness this and produce and use this as an energy? What do you think, Chris, of that?
No, absolutely. I mean, with a lot of these gases, they're way worse than carbon dioxide, right? Like, I don't know what the order of magnitude is, but it's way worse than regular carbon dioxide. So, yeah, I mean, if this is something that's going to naturally happen, like even when it comes to like dumps, right? Like garbage dumps and everything else, those are always producing methane as a byproduct of what is that, decomposition. So, we should be looking at ways to kind of take that as a fuel source and burn it cleanly, so that instead of it methane, which is way worse for the ozone layer, we get carbon dioxide. So yeah, I think being more efficient with the methane sources that we have right now is definitely a place that people should be looking at, because that would make a lot of sense.
So I'll tell you something, Shabri, which is very important, and this is something that kind of got me shocked. So I was working on this one project where this country has a net zero plan, and this country is one of the biggest sources of net zero. Whatever, I mean, the 35%, I think, if I'm right, was the carbon exposure that comes from farming and other things. Okay, but I was told that it is not to be discussed, and I was told that is not a part of net zero. Okay, and now I'm talking about these countries which are ruled by parties which are supposed to be the green energy and everything. So yeah, it's a facade. I mean, I said either you remove it. I mean, if you agree that there is a carbon footprint and carbon footprint is a concern, I mean, you don't have to stop it. You can offset it some other way. I'm not saying that it has to be decarbonized, but it can be offset also. But yeah, people don't want to talk about it. So yeah, man, that's the world of. That's what I say. The ESG in a lot of ways is broken, the way it is today. But we have to fix it. We have to, and the only way it can fix it, if we expand the debate around it. And the way to expand the debate around it, first it has to be taken out of the hand of Silicon Valley and out of Wall Street, because world is a larger place than these two places think. Back to you, Chris.
Gary said it pretty funny. Factory farming, yes, cow farts. He's absolutely right. I mean, dude, even though when people say cow farts, like as a joking way, it's true. There is a significant amount of methane that's produced via cow farts. So thousands of cattle in feedlots. I mean, even moving away from traditional beef is probably not a bad idea. I mean, if every little bit helps, I suppose. I think
If
right
I'm
now,
right,
yeah, I was going to say the biggest
if I'm
change is going to be electric cars. I think we need to get to the point where we're using electric cars, but also using our methane resources in a way that lets us, move to electrification without too much friction. So.
No, I agree. I mean, and I mean, if I let me see if I can get this data right. Just give me a minute, guys. Let me see if I can get it. There is actually a lot of sources of emission that actually comes from agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, like almost 24% of it. Okay, I mean, we can debate around it that what kind of carbon footprint agriculture industry has, but the fact is it has significant. But a lot of people don't want to talk about it because it affects their voter base. So yeah, man, it is like this. There's something Shabri has said. What if we just get solar panels and EV and go whole food planet based? I mean, if we can do that, that's fine, man. I mean, I'm all up for it. It's a dream or it's a realism. That's the challenge. Okay, I mean, Shabri is saying that friend put factory equipment for cattle ranches like this, and the issue isn't the farming itself, but the issue of the fact that a lot of goes to waste. I agree. I mean, it could be the biomass that creates a lot of methane, and I don't know, guys. I mean, if you know this or not, but when I was growing up in India, in my time, especially in 90s, like when there was like this era of like social movements, okay, and India had a lot of them those days. There was one was with a biogas. That means there is a lot of waste that the rural India that creates in terms of agriculture and house waste. And they used to have these plants where you can put actually this inside these plants to rotonate and to create methane, and that methane can be used for energy. I mean, I was like, this was like one of those things which inspired me during my school days, man. This is like a real sustainable. I don't know what happened over the time and why this thing never became so big, but it was something. Same thing. I mean, I agree, man. It's pleasure for you. That yeah, this is another thing. Like we don't talk about it now. If you go to IEA website, you will see that how much money that goes into energy efficiency. I think there is a lot of discussion around this point, that energy transition, but we do not have sufficient discussion around energy consumption and energy efficiency. That if people consume less and if things are more energy efficient, in some countries it could be a problem, especially if you have a consumerism based economy. But consuming less is also a fair way to for net zero, but I'm not sure why it is not being taught discussed a lot.
I know that this is a little bit off topic, but what do you think about China and Russia right now with regards to energy exports? I know China's starting to get a little bit closer to Russia and becoming more, what's the word, symbiotic a little bit in helping each other. I saw some articles about it earlier today. I don't know if you've heard anything about like the Chinese buying up excess Russian oil. Is that a concern to you?
See, my understanding is China will buy excess oil from Russia. I mean, and it's not a concern for me, and I'll tell you why. I mean, let me just see if I can demonstrate it. See, one of the biggest challenge that China has, okay, and I mean, I have to be a little bit, how do I say, like, think like a Chinese if I can for a minute, okay. See, China has a coastline which has been here. It has been covered by Japan on the other side. Okay, if China has to go anywhere in this part of the world, they have to come through and the Malacca Strait, or the strait in between different islands in the Borneo region. That is the only way it can come to this part, or if it has to come from around Russia, or it has to go through and cross the Pacific. So it is not an easy way, and especially if you are importing energy, and if you are importing energy via sea, these chicken necks can be stopped at any time during a global conflict. This is not a good place to be. So China's claim to superpower is always problematic until and unless it has an energy independency, or it can get energy via land routes. 100%. If that cannot happen, there will always be issues for China moving forward in terms of sanctions and all that. Compared to that, if you see the India, I mean, it's a far smaller country, but you can see the access India has in terms of coastline. Okay, this is one of the reasons that when China went for one belt, one road, because they want more routes that are connecting to China. And same thing like the route that decided to go and invest to Pakistan and go through the Arabian Sea, because they do not have access to Arabian Sea. That's why they're investing in places like a lot of places I mean, they did in Maldives, in Sri Lanka, because they get access to these ports. So that's the challenge China has. China has an ambition, and that ambition cannot be reached without access to energy. And so their game is very different Yeah, I mean, they don't mind taking this cheap oil from the hand of Russians. Yeah, that's my view.
See, I think Penny just said something very interesting in the comments, and that was basically around China can probably negotiate some great prices in oil, and now China has their own exchange in Shanghai. So it's almost like this moment could be the last hurrah for the petrodollar. If other countries follow China's lead. What do you think about that?
See, this is where I mean I have a bit of dichotomy of thinking. Okay, if we see that is possible, and we also saw like what China did in terms of London Stock Exchange of nickel short trade. They actually they reversed all the major trades that were against, because a lot of brokers in China were on the losing side of it. Okay, so there is a cloud that is happening. World has tried for a very long time to come out of petrodollar. But guys, the thing is, despite the rising influence of China, China is still not as a big force against Western world as USSR used to be. That is the reality of today. I mean, China is making move, and China is increasing in clout. I mean, that is also happening. China is also very strategic when it comes to exert its economic influence. Okay, it's also in terms of regional power, it's also try to put as much hegemony as possible in South China Sea. So it is doing that part, but replacing petrodollar will take a lot. I mean, I would say that replacing petrodollar is more possibility if Western countries implode within themselves rather than somebody plays or exert. Because China, we have to also accept the fact China is not a country of free thinkers. Okay, you are not allowed to think. So the thing is, they need to manage internally and they need to manage externally. It's a lot of challenge. Okay, and you need a lot of creativity and innovation. Western world, when they opened their borders for China, the idea was that all economic growth will actually bring more thinking, more creativity, and at the end of the day, more democratic processes. But China has created a system of its own, where it literally created the kind of this wall system where it is turned into an economically prosperous country, but yet maintain the institutions which existed from the communist era. So I don't see at this particular point that it has started posing threat, but whether it is sufficient, no, I don't think so at this point. This is my view. I mean, guys, this is a view, so I could be wrong, but this is how I think about it. See, what do you think, Chris?
I think the U.S. should, at this point, because we have such an abundant amount of natural gas, shift the entire economy of the world to natural gas. There you go. Become instead of the petrodollar, put it the carbon, I don't know, the natural gas dollar. Control the natural gas, all the export points. Move away from oil. Basically right now, if you want to go 100% electricity without polluting the environment via coal or anything else, you're gonna have to use cheap, abundant electricity. Natural gas can get you there. And if the U.S. is the world leader on it, and they become a leading member of the natural gas cartel, and then have the Qataris as a secondary backup, there you go. That's all you need. And there you go. Now you have the natural gas dollar.
See, another challenge is I think though we see that Russia and China are very strategic allies at this particular point, but even the history of Russia and China has always been very complicated. I mean,
Well,
because they are
let me stop you for 1 second. Let me tell you, I Chinese and the Russians, they're like friends who hate each other. I know that sounds
yeah.
weird, but they have had a lot of political problems over the last 40 years. And let me tell you, the one deal, I have a friend who literally knows about like crazy, is the Chinese stealing the MiG-21 from the Russians. Okay. Basically, the Chinese were building MiG-21s with a license from Russia, who had originally developed it. So the Chinese were building their own version. And when the Soviet Union fell, the Chinese, they kept making it, but they didn't pay them. And you know why? Because they said, well, we made a deal with the old government, not with you guys. And China has been doing that to the Russians for so long with all sorts of deals. So the Chinese have really like not treated the Russians very fairly. The Russians are like, we don't really like you, China, and China doesn't really like the Russians very much either. You know, I don't
So
know.
this what I mean, this is why I say like these two countries are together a lot of time because of the Western world is against them. Okay, at least in terms of strategic and political sense, and they use it. Yeah, man. I think we kind of pivoted away from our nuclear topic on this part, but guys, I think that's the idea of the discussion having live. I think the key part again goes back to this, like Russia. If you see this part, Russia, China, India, Pakistan, they are nuclear nations. Okay, so this axis, we like it, we don't like it, who is ruling these countries, what are the alignments of these countries with each other, will have a longer term impact on energy. And also, I mean, the rise in the Asian economy, the China, the Southeast Asia, the India, and the Middle Eastern, in a way, I mean, it is quite significant at this particular point. One thing which people forget a lot of time is that when we talk about the religion, politics, and everything, guys, 98, 99% of all religion that are present globally, they all came from Asia. Okay, so theoretically removing Asians or Africans or Latin Americans from the discussion table and tell them you should do this or that, yeah, I think it's a colonial mentality. It's not going to work very well with the current generation. Okay, I'm saying it more as a fact, not as an opinion here. Okay, what do you think, Chris?
No, you're absolutely right. You are absolutely right. You know, I think at this point, the new world order is coming. It's changing. Population declines in the West, population growth in the East, except for China, of course, which is down, and same thing with the Japanese. India looks to be on the road to superpower if they could ever get around their own domestic challenges, of course, which me and you could talk about all day.
No, I agree.
But
I mean, I had a discussion with one of the Chinese professor one time, and she said to me something, and which I mean, I kind of admired in a way. She said the way she views China and India, and this is somebody who coming from China from internally from China. She said she see China as a better hardware and India as a better software. China wants to improve their software, and India won't want to improve their hardware. And to be fair, I mean it was not a bad analogy. I mean the issues of infrastructure and the issues of dichotomy of growth in India is a challenge. I mean this is, people like it, people don't like it, but that's a reality that people in India, actually a lot of people in India are still under quite a basic requirement level. Okay, so this is a challenge, and this is why exactly I go back to the nuclear energy again. I mean, like this is why we find it very difficult nuclear to go out of these bounds, because countries don't trust each other. If you do not trust each other, nuclear has to either become a harmless technology in a certain way, in a miniature form, or in a way like you mentioned in terms of thorium. It is very difficult to actually, I mean, like for example, tomorrow, how would one country believe, like for how would you trust Iran, like especially if you're a Western country, for nuclear technology with all this stigma over all these years? Okay, that's the situation. If we cannot have a technology that can be given to everyone, it is very difficult to make it a large scale. Back to you.
I think we should close it up. I think we've been an hour and a half at this point. I don't know if there's anything really much else to cover for nuclear. Um, yeah, I think maybe we can talk about some consequences of geopolitics next time. You know, of on the oil and natural gas industries and how the world is pivoting to well, I don't want to say a World War III scenario, but the world is starting to pivot towards that. I don't think I've ever seen the world as fractured as I have seen it today.
I
Penny
agree.
is asking about Palantir. The only thing I can tell you about Palantir, Palantir is in Ukraine. Palantir is in Eastern Europe right now, selling everything that they possibly can. One of the things on the interview that I thought was very interesting, and this is just to me, just to say because someone asked, was that Sham, they asked him like, "Oh, what is your status on Ukraine?" And he said very openly, He said, we're working with the generals. That's it. Like, we're working with the generals. We're helping them build things and we're developing IP around it. That was music to my ears, because at the end of the day, this kind of back scratching will lead Palantir to sign some really, really big contracts in the future, because the company that can get your back during times of war, times of stress, will have way more friends after everything is over. So I think right now Palantir, they're doing the smart thing. They're saying to the generals from the West, whatever you guys need, we're gonna help you out. We got your back, and literally we're not concerned about getting paid up front. But guess what? In the back end, these same generals are going to be like, no, we need to go with Palantir. I already used their product. It saved us time, energy, efficiency. So I think it's going to be great. I'm going to love it. I think Sham, that was a really good point that he made, and it made me more bullish on Palantir.
No, I agree. I mean, I just want to summarize like some of the thoughts we had on the nuclear talk today. I think in general, what we are seeing, or what our view is, that there is a lot of traditional and conventional nuclear technologies that at least exist in some form, and some countries are even spending more money and have a large dependence. For example, China, India, and France in general. So they should try to maintain and sustain it for as long as possible, as safely as they can do it. We are very excited about some of the emerging technology, especially in the miniaturization of the nuclear technology, especially fission based. We think that is something which is acceptable at least within selected group of countries who have some kind of nuclear NPT kind of a treaty with them. We are very excited, or at least we hopeful in a way, that fusion is a code to be cracked, and happy to see that a lot of people and prominent people are actually looking into it. But we don't think that can be cracked so easily. We identify some of the major area of concern, that we do not have somebody as a poster boy in terms of a country, in terms of company, or in terms of a figure, somebody like Elon or Alex Carr, which put its weight behind the nuclear technologies. We also see in journal is that if we are going to move out of Earth to moon or to Mars, it is just not possible in a sustainable way if we do not advance further in nuclear technology. So in a way, if you take a view that human species life as a finite on Earth as a planet, I mean, you like it, you don't like it, nuclear has a long way to go and an essential role to play. I mean, for us, what that could be, with time, we can only see. Chris, any last closing remarks from your side?
No, I think nuclear is still ways away from becoming a a major source of energy. There's a lot of headwinds in nuclear's way that I don't see clearing up anytime soon. But that doesn't mean that at a geopolitical event like the one we're seeing right now doesn't accelerate that hurdle from being lowered. Right. Right now, energy independence is pretty much national security, right? Energy independence equals national security. So I would say right now is the best opportunity for nuclear to take a stronger role in helping a lot of countries figure out what their what do you call it, future strategies on energy independence is. And hopefully they wake up to it and they realize that, hey, we need to invest more in this technology and we need to invest more in innovation around it, and quite possibly change their local economies a little bit to make nuclear fit into it, with solar and wind also attached to it. If countries do that, then I think that they could be very healthy and they'll do very well. If they don't and they stay reliant on other countries for their energy sources, that's very defeatist in my opinion, and they'll pay for it, whether it be 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, when there's a geopolitical event that they're on the wrong side of, and they're literally going to have to, them and the people that they have are going to have to face the consequences of it. So I think right now countries should take more action and realize that nuclear is a viable option for future energy, and invest in it, and go for it, especially if you have the bright minds of the world, and access to information. And even, well, some countries, unfortunately, they're not gonna. They've said too many bad things about too many people over the last 50 years, and so there's no one's gonna trust them with nuclear secrets. But that doesn't mean that there can't be some level of peaceful usage and also like what is that thing called? And also like, how do I say it? Working with countries like, believe it or not, Canada and the U.S., even France, in order to develop their nuclear ambitions. You know, as long as they give up the aspirations that they'll eventually be able to get a nuclear bomb. Because I think without signing the non-proliferation treaties, none of these countries will help you even a second to develop your nuclear technology. So
No, I agree. I would like to just close with the final view I have is that the countries and political people who are shutting down nuclear at this particular point or keeping it away in our journey to low carbon to zero carbon energy are not exactly clear what cost they need to pay in future, and this is exactly what we have seen in the recent case. And there will be surprise packages and surprise bills that will come due in future. I'm not happy with the state of nuclear as of journal. I mean, in the low state of trust. I hope nuclear can play more meaningful role, and I hope private companies and governments can put more weight behind it. I think that's all from my side. Thanks, guys, everybody who has joined it. I mean, it was a difficult discussion to talk about it, but yeah, I think it was also an essential one. That, I mean, nuclear option is an option which we are not taking at this particular point. With that, goodbye, everyone. Take care.
take care, everyone.